And that's what climate change is about. It is literally, not figuratively, a clear and present danger.
We are in the beginning of a mass extinction.
The ability of CO2 to do the heavy work of creating a climate catastrophe is almost nil at this point.
The price of oil has been artificially elevated to the point of insanity.
That's not how you power a modern industrial system.
The ultimate goal of this renewable energy, plan is to reach the exact same point that we're at now.
You know who's tried that? Germany. 7 straight days of no wind for Germany. Their factories are shutting down.
They really do act like weather didn't happen prior to 1910.
Today is Friday.
That's right, Greta. It is Friday. It's the most important day of the week because it's the day that the Heartland Institute broadcasts the Climate Realism Show worldwide. I know we have viewers international, and welcome to you as well. My name is Jim Lakely. I am the vice president of the Heartland Institute, and we have a terrific show for you today. There is no other show like the Climate Realism Show streaming anywhere, so I hope you will like, share, and subscribe, and actually even personally tell people about it. The more the merrier in our live chats on YouTube, Rumble, and now X. And a reminder, because the big tech oligarchs and the legacy media do not like the way we cover climate and energy news and policy on this program, our YouTube channel has been demonetized. So if you want to support this program, and I really hope you do, please visit heartland.org/TCRS, heartland.org/TCRS. That stands for The Climate Realism Show. And that will help us keep making this show happen every single week. Any support you can give is greatly appreciated. And I also want to thank our new streaming partners, CFACT and junkscience.com. This program today, right now, is live streaming on their X accounts. And so we're going to have even more people getting exposed to climate realism. And we want to thank them very much for their cooperation and help with that today. So today we have with us, as usual on the show, Anthony Watts. He's the senior fellow at the Heartland Institute and the publisher of the most influential climate website anywhere in the world. What's up with that? We have Dr. H. Sterling Burnett, the director of the Arthur B. Robinson Center on Climate and Environmental Policy at the Heartland Institute. And of course, Linnea Lukin, research fellow for energy and environment policy at Heartland and the star of our Climate at a Glance video series here on the Heartland Institute YouTube channel and Rumble. So be sure to check those out. We have 2 new videos at least every single week. And we are so happy to bring back a special guest. It's kind of a homecoming, a little old home week here on the Climate Realism Show. It's Isaac Orr. Isaac Orr is a former energy expert for us at the Heartland Institute. He's known on X as the fracking guy. He's also formerly an energy fellow at the Center of the American Experiment based in Minnesota. And he's the vice president of research at Always On Energy Research, and also has a new venture called Energy Bad Boys, which you can find at energybadboys.substack.com. Welcome to the show, everybody. This is going to be a good one.
Looking forward to it. I got to say, watching the intro video every week.
Yeah.
I've been wondering. It's like I remind myself of someone. I've decided I don't like who I remind myself of. I was wearing a sweatshirt that day, a hoodie. I'm not as overweight as he is, but I'm balding and overweight. I realized I looked like John Fetterman a bit. It was a bit disturbing.
That's the first time I would have ever thought somebody would confuse you with Fetterman, though, Sterling. All right. Anthony, you're muted if you're speaking. Nope, you're still muted. As he figures that out, I also want to mention I neglected to do this. Oh my gosh, I'm going to get killed for it. We are also simultaneously streaming on the What's Up With That X account as well. Isaac, so you haven't been at Heartland for, what is it, when you left Heartland for other pastures? What was that, 6 years ago? I mean, it's been a while.
Yeah, 2018 was my last little stint at Heartland. So good to be back in the fold.
All right. Well, tell us a little bit about Always On Energy Research.
Yeah. So my colleague Mitch Rolling and I started our own nonprofit energy. I don't know if you want to call it consulting firm, but we are a research institute. So we primarily look at how EPA regulations or state policies impact the reliability and cost of the electric grid. So that's our main bread and butter. Our analysis on the EPA's carbon rule was actually included in the 27 state stay motion to try to get that stayed at first the Court of Appeals and now the Supreme Court. So, luckily we've been in the right place at the right time, and we've been able to do some work that's actually going to do some good for the country.
That's fantastic. Glad to hear that, and glad to have you back on the show. We used to be on the pretty regular on the In the Tank podcast at Heartland, and now we have you on this. And I know you've been doing great work on energy policy when you were at Heartland, and since you've been away from Heartland, and that's just great. So
In the Take was great until I got fired from the show. So I'm happy to be back on.
You got fired from the show. I don't know who did that. I couldn't imagine.
It was Justin. He didn't like the fact that I was more handsome than he is.
No, I get that a lot too. Okay, so we're gonna Anthony. I think we have Anthony back.
Yeah, when you're on the road, you have to take what life gives you and the internet gives you.
Right.
And so I hope you can hear me now.
We can, Anthony. Now, Anthony, we have a lot to cover on the show today, but you are on the road. You're actually in a public hotel lobby, so we will have 911 at the ready if somebody comes up behind you. But just considering what we're going to be talking about, but you are in Northern California. You are there near the Park Fire. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
I got to tell you, this Park Fire is a monster, and I don't use that term lightly. It is bigger now in terms of acreage burn than the Camp Fire in 2018, and it's man-made. It was caused by a two-strike felon who decided to take his mother's car, set it on fire, and push it down into a ravine in Upper Bidwell Park. He had a number of people watch him do it, and then he casually walked away as if nothing had happened. The sheriff, of course, investigated, found him, took him to jail. He's in jail with no bail. But I can tell you, people in Northern California are out for blood on this guy. And anybody who tries to blame this on climate change, bring this up. Because the people out there will try to take advantage of it. Oh, climate change caused a fire. Climate change made it more real. Climate change made it bigger. Well, that's just BS. And you call them on it and say it was started by a felon, and leave it at that.
In California, California's not in drought. They had good snowpack this
No, it's
year.
not.
Last 2 years, they've had good snowpack. If anything, that made the trees and things and the brush grow better.
Right. I blame the spotted owl because when the spotted owl law was put into effect in the early 1980s, basically logging stopped, forest management stopped, and so the forest just went out of control. And now there's just low underbrush and fuel. They made fun of Trump when he said, go rake the forest. Well, that's what they really need to do. They need to go out there and clean this underbrush out to keep the forest healthy. But they haven't. And because the environmentalists say you can't touch it because it's sacred ground.
Plus, spotted owls are, notorious for smoking, and they toss their butts and start fires.
There was a famous bumper sticker that used to be on a lot of vehicles in the 80s that said, if you're out of toilet paper, wipe your beep with a spotted owl.
Right.
Anyway, that's it for me.
All right. Well, for as long as that weak hotel lobby Wi-Fi holds out, we're going to start with Anthony's favorite segment, which is the crazy climate news of the week. And again, these are stories that we share among people on the show and at the Heartland Institute. We usually share maybe about 10 or 12 of them, and we can only get maybe to the top 3. But this is one of the good ones. So from Yahoo News, it says that fires threaten Mediterranean after world record's hottest day. Now, before we get into the meat of that story, everybody's favorite global climate alarmist, Antonio Gutierrez of the United Nations, has another dire warning for the world. Anthony, can you please, or Andy, can you please play that for everyone?
Past Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday were the 3 hottest days on record. But let's face facts. Extreme temperatures are no longer a 1 day, 1 week, or 1 month phenomenon. if there is one thing that unites our divided world, is that we are all increasingly feeling the heat. Earth is becoming hotter and more dangerous for everyone, everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
He says as he sits in his air-conditioned office.
Right. I'll be feeling the heat after this show when I have lunch. But anyway, this Yahoo News story is actually from Bloomberg. Says that the world recorded its hottest day ever as many parts of the Mediterranean face extreme wildfire risks. Sunday, that is July 21st, witnessed the highest average temperature on Earth, breaching a previous record set a year ago, according to a provisional data from the European Union's Copernicus Climate Change Service. Global average temperatures have already hit or exceeded a key climate threshold for 12 months, highlighting the challenge of limiting global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius, which was a number pulled out of the air, above the pre-industrial era. Climate change is increasing the frequency and intensity of heat waves, bringing extreme weather events from flooding to wildfires, blah, blah, blah. Global warming is bringing hotter conditions to southern Europe with temperatures exceeding 40 degrees Celsius for the past 2 weeks in Greece. And that is turbocharging the threat from wildfires. Now, we have this chart, and we have a couple charts and graphics to show you, and I'm going to be setting Anthony up for this one. But Andy, there's that slide. So this is a slide. This was shared on Twitter. I'm sorry, X. I got to start calling it X. By Nahel Belgaris, and it shows supposedly the world that look at that red line going up to 17.09 degrees Celsius. That's quite the precise measurement, I gotta say. Now, Anthony, you've pointed out to us that this figure is bogus. And you also linked to a website that got into the technical weeds of this. So maybe, Andy, there's a second link there. You can bring that up if Anthony wants to talk about that. And then Anthony can, while his Wi-Fi holds out, kind of debunk the alarmist, panic-inducing graphics that are distorted to make people panic.
Well, let's go back to that graph that we had just a moment ago. Okay. And that is that graph right there. There you go. Daily global air surface temperature. Well, this is not from real data. This is not from the data that's been measured that day. It's from a computer model. It's called a reanalysis model, ERA5. And basically what it does is it creates new data by looking at old data and makes a projection. And I can tell you with certainty, we cannot measure Earth's global temperature to within 100th of a degree. It's just not possible. Even though they claim you can, but it's not possible. And so some of these records that are being set, these supposed records, are literally being set by hundredths of a degree. And, they're using it for political purposes. And that's it. That's all this is. This is political and propaganda stuff. The bottom line is that most of this temperature record didn't come from places like the Mediterranean. It wasn't excessively hot there, but it came from Antarctica, where instead of it being minus 80 degrees, it's minus 70. Oh no, the world is burning up. Literally, that's what's going on here. It's just bogus beyond belief. And of course, it's being used for headlines. And of course, you can see how important all this is because they've got that nice spinning globe in there to make sure everybody understands it's the whole world.
The same. These are the same models that even their operators and the people that use them say run too hot. So you shouldn't be surprised this model runs too hot. When you look at real world data, most of the central part of the United States in the early part of the week was well below normal for temperatures for the time of the year.
Yep.
There's a big cool spell. Some cities and towns, ranging from Montana all the way down to Arkansas and my own home state of Texas, set new records for record low maximums during this week of supposedly the hottest temperatures ever. Killeen broke its old low maximum record by more than 4 degrees. As I sit here in Dallas, I think it's in the 70s, which is really unusual for late July in Dallas. My pool has started to cool off because it's getting low at night. data comes from measuring systems. What models put out is not data.
Right. So Anthony, you also, Linnea, you have something to add before we move on?
Yeah, I wanted to add that Borenstein, right? That's the right pronunciation of his name, at the AP, very carefully, because I think the AP is the one that broke this particular story first, or at least it's the first one that I saw, very carefully chose the language they used in their telling of the story. And he reported it as temperature measurements. And when you click on the link that goes to their website, you know, they say this is from ERA5 reanalysis. This isn't measurement based. But the AP intentionally is calling it temperature measurements, even though they know full well that it's not from temperature measurements. So I just wanted to point that out. Sometimes it's not just incompetence. I think that they're smart enough to know the difference over there, considering how much they cover this issue.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Knock me over with a feather. The media's lying to us, especially about the climate. All right. You know what they also lie? Another good way to lie is to distort and to put up graphics like this. Now, this is something that Anthony shared with us at Heartland. And, you know, guys, I guess Antonio Gutierrez is correct. The Earth is the era of global boiling has begun. Look at that. The entire Earth is red.
That's the angry red planet, right? That's Mars or Mercury, I guess.
Right. What triggered you about this, Anthony?
Well, what triggered me, of course, was the excessive redness. You know, we need global Visine for this thing. It's just bogus beyond belief, like the other thing. And so what's interesting about this graph is the temperature scale down at the bottom. Now, if you look at the temperature scale, it shows the lie that they put into this. This graphic has a built-in lie. At minus 6 degrees centigrade, you know, well below the freezing point of water, warm colors start to develop. We don't have the colds, the blues and the magentas. We don't have that at 0 degrees centigrade or at minus 6. And so what they did is they shifted the warm colors to below the freezing point of water to make it look like this entire globe is burning up. And for people, regular people that don't understand graphics, don't understand how this is created, don't understand the lie behind it, this is a panic image. They look at this and think, oh no, the Earth is burning up. We have to do something. And so this is propaganda in its purest form. And it's really easy to change this scale of color and make it look, well, not so scary. And I did that. I with the help of Charles Rotter, who runs What's Up With That with me, we came up with this. And look at this. We shifted the scale. You know, we couldn't shift it completely because there were so few colors in it. But you can see that now with a green being at 0, we have all these different shades and hues that are not alarming at all. And no one can look at the green Earth and say we're burning up. They can look at the red one and say, oh no, climate catastrophe, climate emergency. It's propaganda.
Yeah. 100%. Thank you for doing that, Anthony. I think that's a great service. But yeah, when you look at the original graph and it doesn't even start to turn green until you get to below minus 12. I mean, come on, man. That's absurd. Most people would have that pretty deep blue at that point. But again, there's a lot of propaganda out there. And that's why the Climate Realism Show is here to help push through it. All right. Our second item today is, well, this concerns all of us, including you too, Isaac Gore, because you're not going to get away scot-free on this. This is from Climate Press, and they are naming names, and those names are climate criminals. A new research project, Climate Criminals, has been launched today, that's actually earlier this week, in Union Square, New York City, beneath the climate clock to charge 24 individuals who bear responsibility for delaying action on climate change and locking the U.S. and planet Earth into a trajectory to blow past 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature rises. And Heartland Institute President James Taylor, we're so proud to announce, is number 7 on that list. It's so great. For its launch moment, 24 dossiers have been released to name each climate criminal and their crimes, which range from money laundering to fraud to crimes against future generations of the Earth. In tandem, a public reveal of wanted posters has taken place as climate activists gathered to observe the Climate Clock's Climate Emergency Day 2024. Gosh, this is exhausting. Which recognized the passing of the deadline to limit 1.5 degrees centigrade of global warming tick below 5 years for the first time in history. Now, this whole little campaign, and gosh, the environmental left is nothing if not enthusiastic about silly PR campaigns. It's led by the newly formed Climate Accountability Research Project, CARP. It leaned on the consultancy with climate change organizations and activists, including Climate Clock, Global Center for Climate Justice, Greenpeace, Summer of Heat, and many, many others. It is such a wonderful little cottage industry that climate alarmism is, and the money flows like water in a climate change-caused super flood. Now, with that set up,
Sounds like a movie title, Super Flood.
that's right. All right. So the second link there, Andy, is the profiles of the climate criminals. This is quite the collection of rogues and knaves. We've got the CEOs of big banks and hedge funds and oil companies. And if you scroll down a bit, a little bit more there, Andy, you will come across our boss, James Taylor, the president of the Heartland Institute. There he is, pictured at one of our climate conferences in the recent past. You click on that, and it says, as president of the Heartland Institute, James M. Taylor is responsible for the alleged crimes of fraud and crimes against future generations of the earth. Under his leadership, the Heartland Institute continues to be the premier climate denial organization in the United States. I wish I had an applause button for that one. It says that we spend millions of dollars on advertising campaigns and anti-climate science education to maintain the status quo of fossil fuel usage in America. And it says it claims that we are funded heavily by organizations associated with the fossil fuel industry, and that we continue to promote well-disproven lies as a distraction and deterrence from climate-forward legislation. Now, as I said, there it is. Yep. You could not be prouder of that designation. When you are taking flack, you are over the target. But that last sentence that we get lots of money from big oil is completely false, not true. As Anthony jokes often on this show, he's still waiting for his check. He can't wait to buy a new gas guzzling truck, but it just never comes. But Sterling, like me, you work closely with James every single day. Now going to start rethinking your association with James and the Heartland Institute so that you two are not singled out as a climate criminal and thrown in climate jail?
The short answer is no.
Good.
The longer answer is, first off, they're the ones committing fraud. Since factually we don't get money from big oil, wish it were the case. They should be funding us, but they're not. We don't promote denial. We promote climate realism on science. We actually put out data. You're not a criminal until you've been convicted. As far as I know, none of these people have been convicted, and they haven't identified a particular crime to convict them. Well, they say fraud, but fraud in what sense? Is somehow they're getting money? I don't know. I think the thing that upsets me the most about this, money is being wasted on it, which I always hate to see scarce resources wasted, though I guess if it's going to these guys, it's not going to some presidential campaign, which I might name. But the most important failing of this is that I didn't make the list. I'm a little upset about that. I've always wanted my face on this kind of wanted poster, especially if I could put on like a cowboy hat or something and a poncho. But I didn't make the list, so it's clearly a flawed list.
Yeah, well, you just need to work a little harder, I guess. Isaac Orr, you are a known associate of climate criminals, and under climate law, that makes you just as guilty as the climate criminals themselves. So I hope you're calling up a lawyer.
Climate Rico there.
Have you ever
I'm
been
not
called
too
a
worried
criminal?
about it. I can't. Well, I mean, I have a Desmog blog page, but they haven't updated in years. I don't know what happened to them in terms of their work ethic, but I don't know. I can't believe people are still doing these kinds of lists. It feels so 10 years ago. But I guess like if you're going to get money from the Energy Foundation and all these other big left-wing groups, you might as well spend it.
Yep, for sure. All right. Well, I just wanted to make sure that we could brag about being among, and our president of the Heartland Institute being number 7. I mean, that's impressive. I mean, he's ahead of a lot of really, really bad people, according to the climate alarmists. So I wanted to make sure that we pointed that out, and we'll keep you updated if any of us get added to the list or if James Taylor moves up. All right.
I don't recall, Jim, before we leave, did
Yep.
any other think tank head make the list?
Heritage did, I think.
Heritage.
Did? Okay. Well, we got some work to do, fellas.
Yeah. We got to kick Heritage off that list.
Well, I find it hard to believe that they even measure, since climate is not a major portion of their work.
Yeah. Anthony, last
I'd
word?
like to point out that you can go to that website, climatecriminals.org, and you can nominate people to be included on the list. So, I'm sure all of our viewers can come up with a list of climate crimes to suit all of us. So if you want to nominate us, there you go.
There you go. Yeah, we have 1,000 people watching this stream right now on everywhere it's being streamed. So that's Sterling Burnett. Actually, it's an H period Sterling Burnett to make sure they get the right guy and they don't arrest some poor Sterling Burnett who lives in Omaha somewhere. All right.
By the way, just to bolster my case, I'm currently running my air conditioning at below temperatures recommended by the U.S. government for the thermostat.
Yeah, and I used a vehicle to drive here instead of taking public transit.
Great. All right. Well, Anthony's starting to break up. Who knows how long his Wi-Fi will go? So we'll get to the third item very quickly here. There once was a disaster off Nantucket. We have a story here for the Wall Street Journal, and we covered this on last week's show as well. This was the turbine. A turbine blade break pollutes the beaches of the liberal gentry. Wall Street Journal editorial writes, there's no such thing as clean energy, and the liberal gentry on Nantucket are learning, after an offshore wind turbine blade snapped and littered beaches with debris. Somehow, the uproar among progressives is more muted than after an oil spill or a train derailment. I don't think that's going to last forever, though. Anyway, this is the second major break in recent months involving GE Vernova's Haliade X turbines, which are nearly as tall as the Eiffel Tower. Another blade broke off a turbine off the coast of England. GE Vernova and Siemens Gamesa have also struggled with defective offshore turbines, with some toppling over and requiring expensive repairs. I'm going to go to you here in a second, Isaac, because you have a post at your Substack about this, as a matter of fact. But I'm on a regular email thread with other climate realists, and one of them actually lives in Nantucket on that southern facing beach. And she said a few days ago that the beach has been closed for 10 days. Now, I'm almost sorry to reply this to a friend, but I'm sorry, not sorry. I hope the beaches in Nantucket stay closed the rest of the summer, because maybe if the liberal gentry are robbed of their usual summer relaxation routines, that will be the only way probably to snap them out of their green energy delusion and the idea that wind is great. I would hope that this kind of thing could turn the tide, so to speak. Isaac, I mean, you're the energy bad boy, energybadboys.substack.com. You have a piece on this very thing going on.
Yeah, I mean, this is really a product of the energy policies that they're enacting in New England and New York and other, East Coast states like Maryland and New Jersey, where they have these unrealistic emissions reductions targets. And the only way that they can get there is building lots and lots of offshore wind. And, offshore wind is incredibly expensive. It's funny because the advocates of offshore wind, like the Sierra Club, they commissioned this study to say, oh, well, this will help hedge against high natural gas prices. But right now, one of the offshore wind projects in Massachusetts, they're going to sell electricity for $98 a megawatt hour, which is more than the highest cost of natural gas fire generation in New England during the 2022 price spike due to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So these geniuses on the East Coast plan to hedge by building wind turbines that produce energy that is more expensive than the thing that they are hedging against in the worst case scenario. And it's even worse in New York. They're looking at $150 a megawatt hour for their electricity. So we found that, I think it was, in 2023, ISO New England, which is the power grid in New England, natural gas generation is like $50 a megawatt hour. So it's a third of the cost of these new wind projects. So it just doesn't make sense from an economic standpoint. And then you get a situation like this where, now there's an environmental consequence that people are feeling. And I think it's definitely another blow to an industry that's already seen several cancellations of projects off the East Coast.
It's crazy how these numbers on the ground can be so solid, but as soon as you mention, these realities, what they'll do is they'll go to the Energy Information Administration and send you a bunch of pictures of levelized costs charts, right? Can you explain a little bit why that's not applicable here?
Yeah, absolutely. So the levelized cost of energy is an attempt to show you the cost of generating 1 megawatt hour or 1 unit of electricity from any given source. And it's kind of like trying to figure out the cost of your car on a per mile driven basis. So you can kind of think of it like that. But the problem with using the levelized cost of energy for wind and solar is that these resources don't always show up when you need them. In fact, it's a feature, not a bug, that these things tend to disappear when you actually need the power. So like the levelized cost of energy for wind and solar, especially offshore wind, does not take into account the extra costs that ratepayers or, families and businesses end up paying as a result of needing natural gas or battery backup. And they don't take into account the transmission infrastructure, which in New England is going to be anywhere between $23 and $26 billion in order to accommodate these green fantasies. So, it's really cheap as long as you ignore almost all of the costs and you also include the federal tax credits or the subsidies that we are shelling out. So, other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's offshore wind rivals only battery backup as the two most expensive sources of electric power when you count all the costs. So it's and Isaac said, oh, well, now they've had environmental impacts from this stuff since their inception. We're fighting them in court on the whales and endangered species. They're slaughtering protected marine mammals. It's not just endangered whales. All marine mammals are protected by law. We have a law called the Marine Mammal Protection Act, and yet they get waivers. They get waivers to kill thousands. Well, I don't think it's actually constitutional, but I also don't think these offshore winds are constitutional. I've read the Constitution, and I don't see where the Constitution says the federal government gets to decide what energy source you use. I missed that provision. I've read it several times, but maybe I'm just stupid. It ain't in there.
I would imagine Justin is very pro offshore wind because he is anti-whale, as he has made abundantly clear in several episodes of In the Tank. So I just want to add some context for the listeners. Maybe he goes to the top of the list for the climate criminals as a result. But I just wanted to add a little color commentary there for the audience.
But it's not just the damage to marine mammals. Look, it's the disruption of the fisheries. It's the disruption of tourism. It's the destruction of view sheds. If you like wild areas, the oceans are some of the last remaining truly wild areas on Earth. And now we're industrializing them.
Yeah.
Environmentalists used to get up in arms over this stuff. They cared about whales. They sure cared when it's offshore oil derricks, despite the fact that you can't see them compared to these wind turbines that are, double the size or more. They throw it all out the window when they see climate change as a way to give them power over people's lives.
When you're looking out over the ocean and you're in the $4 million vacation home on Nantucket, would you rather accidentally have your eyes hit 4 offshore oil derricks or 4,000 bird chippers? I think the answer is pretty easy. And I think, again, the liberal gentry in these places is starting to find out that they've been lied to about how clean and easy and great so-called green energy is with wind turbines. So.
And now they got to worry about the fiberglass from these things getting in their feet when they're walking on the beach, right?
Yeah. Like I said, I hope that stuff, this was, again, to put this in perspective, this was one turbine with one blade. That's it. And so this is like a spilt milk, a small glass of spilt milk compared to what could happen out there one day. I mean, so I hope the beaches in Nantucket, no offense, are closed the whole summer. So you guys learn the hard way what matters.
Give it a few years, and here's what's going to happen. Those wind turbine blades are going to stress from use, flexing that fiberglass. And at some point, they're going to weaken, cracks, and so forth. Then we're going to get a major storm coming through up the coast, like Hurricane Sandy did a few years ago. And it's going to hit that region, and it's going to splinter these things all over, and it's going to be an environmental disaster of epic proportions.
Well, and in the meantime, just in daily use, they're shedding microplastics into the ocean, which we're also supposed to be concerned about. So these things are environmental monstrosities, and they're economic boondoggles.
Yep. All right. We're gonna move on because we are gonna get to our main topic today for sure. But usually this is the part in the show where we show some cartoons or funny memes about the climate. But actually, I wanted to point something out visually that isn't actually very funny. And Andy, can you bring up this slide? There you go. So this was shared by a friend of the show and a previous guest, Tom Nelson, on X. I had posted natively to X a video of Linnea explaining that we are not, in fact, experiencing unprecedented heat waves. And the video, to Tom Nelson and apparently to many others, has a content warning. The following may contain sensitive material. Now, when I look at our stuff, I don't see that. So it's nice that other people see it and let us know. And then Linnea, she visited Heartland's media page on X, and it showed that every single video that we have uploaded, and they are pretty much all on climate, have a warning, sensitive content on them. And so you literally cannot see the image. And this is obviously to discourage anybody from watching this who wants to see sensitive content. It could be something very horrible. But really, the image is just Linnea sitting and talking. So, this is an example. Linnea, I'll let you take it first. I mean, the idea, the shadow banning is still going on. The suppression of climate truth is still happening. It's a long fight, and we're still fighting it.
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of funny, in the way that they blur it and stuff. It makes it seem like it's going to be some salacious, weird, something weird going on. Yeah, nope. I don't know how you even fix something like this, because this has been happening since before Elon took over, and it's continuing into his ownership of X. So I don't know. They don't seem to care. I'm sure there's still a bunch of weirdos working it behind the scenes at X, censoring people and stuff. You can't catch them all. I don't know. Well, we're going to put in some requests for review and stuff, I imagine, and try to get this stopped, because this has been going on for a while and it's very obnoxious. And it definitely, the worst of it though isn't even just that all of our content gets a sensitive content notification. The worst of it is the Heartland Institute's official Twitter account is unsearchable. You can type in the actual tag of the account, and it doesn't come up in the search bar on X, even if you're following them. So it's, us in particular, I guess that's why we're on the climate criminals list, because we're just that bad.
The latter point about the search is very, very disturbing. The fact that they've got these images, well, not really images. I wouldn't call those images. That's just weird looking gray space. But Jim said, "Oh, maybe that will suppress our viewership." In my experience, when you tell somebody, "Oh, this is sensitive," a teen, you tell a teen, "Don't look in there. They're looking." You say, "Oh, this is the scary part. Cover your eyes." They're like this with their eyes covered, but their fingers splayed. This might actually drive more people to our stuff, just because they want to see, oh my God, what are these terrible people saying or doing?
I mean, if they even find it, if
Well,
people
now
like
that's
Tom
yeah.
Nelson and them weren't retweeting it, then it probably we'd be screaming into the dark there. That's what the shadow ban is supposed to be for. It's that none of your content can reach anyone
Right.
unless they seek it out.
And Elon Musk has even said, I think he said, free speech doesn't mean free reach, and that he's going to continue to, certainly not like the disinformation board of the Biden administration coming in and working hand in glove with the people behind Twitter and Facebook and all the other places. But I mean, this is absolutely absurd. I mean, there is obviously absolutely nothing sensitive about talking about the fact that it was hotter in the 1930s in the United States than it was in the 1990s or the 2000s. I mean, that's not sensitive content. I guess if you're a climate alarmist, it's sensitive to you, but do we have to accommodate them as if they're everybody? I mean, it's absolutely crazy. Any more comments on this before we move on? Before I get too angry again? All right. Let's get into our topic areas. Thank you, Linnea. We will look into fixing that, and we will let everybody on the show know how it goes. You can also probably send a note to Twitter yourself. That would be a great help. All right. So we're going to talk now about Kamala Harris's climate and energy record. And it might be even worse if she is to succeed Joe Biden as president than Biden's was. This is a story from Just the News. It says that President Joe Biden campaigned for the 2020 election on a promise to end fossil fuels. And during his time in the White House, Biden and the Democrats, according to the Institute for Energy Research, have taken more than 200 actions that have made it more expensive and difficult to produce oil and gas in the United States. And in some ways, Harris has aligned herself with even more radical climate policies than Biden. Tom Pyle, president of the American Energy Alliance, told Just the News, quote, "I think that she has the potential to be even more hostile to the oil and gas industry, at least as bad as the current administration, but I expect her to align herself more closely with the fringe elements of the left." So we should point out that Kamala Harris was one of the original sponsors of the Green New Deal, which was the brainchild of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And the Green New Deal was going to transform the U.S. economy through mindless green energy and other programs. In fact, her own chief of staff admitted on camera, I think on someone's camera phone, that the whole point of the Green New Deal was not to save the environment, it was to reform the entire economy. And then we're going to play a clip here, which should make anybody who enjoys a backyard barbecue pretty angry. But during the Democratic primary debates, Harris said that we must adopt the Green New Deal. We must commit to net zero by 2030. She called climate change an existential threat. She bragged of taking on the big oil companies when she was the Attorney General of California. She sued the Obama administration, of all things, for allowing fracking offshore of California. Again, she reiterated her pledge to ban fracking nationwide. She wants to actually even change the dietary guidelines by government, dictate to limit the consumption of red meat. And I want to play this video, and then we'll go to Isaac Ord to take his take on Kamala Harris's probably more radical climate and energy policies than Biden. Go ahead and play it, Andy, please.
But now more questions for Senator Kamala Harris. So let's go straight to an audience question now. Carolyn Corsant is a lawyer from New York, Senator. She has a question about the impact of certain foods on the environment. Just to give some context here, the United Nations says that livestock cattle, contribute 14.5% of all human-produced greenhouse gases, which is an incredible number. Caroline, go ahead with your question.
Thank you. Climate change has been linked to agriculture and the overconsumption of red meat and also the overproduction of crops. Certain countries have changed their dietary guidelines to reduce the consumption of red meat in light of the impact of the climate change.
Yeah.
If elected, will you be supporting change in dietary guidelines? And then how will you plan on implementing the changes so that people effectively change their diets?
Yeah, I mean, and thank you, Carol, for your work on the question. I think of the point that you're raising in a broader context, which is that as a nation, we actually have to have a real priority at the highest level of government around what we eat and in terms of healthy eating, because we have a problem in America. And we can talk about all that we are now, the subject of this conversation. We can talk about the amount of sugar in everything. We could talk about soda. We could go on and on. So the answer is yes. But I'll also say this. The balance that we have to strike here, frankly, is about what government can and should do around creating incentives and then banning certain behaviors. I mean, just to be very honest with you, I love cheeseburgers from time to time, right? I mean, I just do. And I think that, but there has to be also what we do in terms of creating incentives that we will eat in a healthy way, that we will encourage moderation, and that we will be educated about the effect of our eating habits on our environment. And we have to do a much better job of that, and the government has to do a much better job of that.
So, I mean, I'm just saying, you love cheeseburgers. I mean, we all do. I don't know whether
you know, from time to
try
time,
the
I don't eat
Beyond
them every
Burger,
day,
the Impossible
but,
Burger, right? They try, but it's not quite the same. That's my personal opinion. But would you support changing the dietary guidelines?
Yes.
The food pyramid. What people
yes.
to reduce red meat specifically.
Yes, I would. And I'll tell you,
So Isaac Orr, Kamala Harris, if she is president, is going to decide that the food pyramid needs to be changed, not for any other reason than that she doesn't like anybody having cheeseburgers more than from time to time. I probably have more cheeseburgers than you. I defy almost anyone to have more cheeseburgers than me in a given week. But I mean, this is not a science-based climate or energy policy. This is a politically based and a punishing policy based on nonsense.
Yeah, I don't know if anybody's going to care about if the government changes the dietary guidelines. I don't know that people really follow that stuff. But, I think that her desire to ban fracking, her embrace of the Green New Deal, that's just bad for the country. I mean, the United States is the largest producer of natural gas in the world. We have been since 2009. We're currently producing more oil than any country ever has before. And that's because of fracking. And if she's going to take steps to regulate that, and she can't ban fracking because most of it's done on private land. But what she can do is she can weaponize the EPA in order to crack down on drilling, make it more difficult, make it more expensive, and ultimately reduce it through regulatory means. So I mean, like I said, that's bad for the country. It's bad for the hundreds of thousands of people that work in that industry. It's bad for consumers that have to pay more at the pump or pay more for home heating. But it's also bad for their foreign policy objectives. If the Democrats are very concerned about Ukraine, the dumbest thing we could possibly do is reduce our domestic production of energy and empower Putin with higher prices. I mean, that's exactly what we saw after the initial invasion. The prices spiked, and part of it was because of the roadblocks that the Biden-Harris administration threw up in the first place. So, I mean, the dietary guidelines are silly. I don't think anybody's going to care about that. I don't think they're going to alter their behavior based on that. But if you had some sort of meat tax, that would get me mad because I'm a farm kid and I do not appreciate it.
I wrote about this, about Harris, in my Climate Change Weekly, which I encourage everyone to sign up for if you're not already a subscriber. I wrote about it today. But just in the bit that we just saw, there's a lot of disturbing stuff there. Isaac is right. I doubt many people follow the dietary guidelines, but they are used for school lunch programs to shape school lunch programs. And so perhaps they will be used to limit kids' access to red meat. That's government directly saying you're not going to get it. I mean, to some extent, they already do that. They're locking, they're grabbing people who send the wrong bag lunches to school. So that disturbs me. In addition, coming from her, it's just like when she was a prosecutor, right? She laughed about smoking pot as she locked people up. Well, she eats her cheeseburgers, but she talks about changing dietary guidelines, and she says, "Oh, we got to get rid of gas appliances." She supports it, and then she films herself cooking on a gas appliance, a turkey, for Thanksgiving. It ain't a near meat turkey; it's a real turkey. So This lady is the queen of climate hypocrisy, And it's dangerous. Now, she supports the Green New Deal. I should say it's actually not fair to blame AOC as the progenitor of the Green New Deal. Tulsi Gabbard had a Green New Deal before there was an AOC. So it's been around for a little bit longer than that, and it was bad then, and it remains bad today.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a food pyramid disrespecter by default. It's been trash my entire life. I'm sure it's been trash for longer than I've been alive. So I don't really care what they put on the food pyramid. I'm not following it. You know, what is it, like 11 servings of grains per day or whatever it is that they have on it now?
Yeah.
That's not going to happen. But yeah, no, the
great for
the part-
diabetics. Yeah, that's great for
Yeah.
diabetics, by the way.
The part that makes it dangerous is, you know, they're asking her about like changing dietary guidelines, I think in order to prevent her from talking about the fact that they want to put a little bit firmer stuff, you know, into the hands of the government, like putting a significant tax on meat consumption, the way that they put taxes on alcohol, that kind of thing. So they're tossing her easy questions that you feel like you can just ignore, you know, if the government does it, in order to prevent you from realizing what they're actually talking about is stuff that will actually affect you and that you cannot escape from.
Yeah. I mean, I want to get into some of the other points of her, what would be her climate and energy agenda. I mean, we went over the GOP platform on climate and energy, and I did a word search for that, and the word climate appears 0 times, and the word energy appears 18 times. But Anthony, this is, you know, just kind of going after red meat, and we've talked about this. And you know, Klaus Schwab, when he was head of the WEF, said, "You will eat the bugs." You know, that this idea that cattle raising, that, you know, eating like a good red-blooded American or good red-blooded European or Australian who likes beef is one of the major drivers of climate change. So thus, we have to stop. I mean, this is indoctrination. This is not backed up by science.
Yeah, well, you have to kind of look at Kamala's background. She's had some science background, but we all know from watching her speak and what she does that she's not that bright. And so she's taking the propaganda lies that are coming from the climate activists, swallowing them hook, line, and sinker, and thinking that she is out to save the world by doing their bidding. I mean, it's as simple as that. And, you know, she is more radical than Biden. And she is a danger to the United States of America and to the world if she follows down these paths that these activists are feeding her.
Yeah. Well, Isaac, I want to go back to you. I mean, as you mentioned, and we've mentioned here while going over her agenda, she seems to be the biggest enemy of hydraulic fracturing anywhere in public life, and that's not an easy thing to accomplish.
Yeah, her, Bernie, and AOC, they're kind of all on that same platform. And like, I honestly don't know if Kamala Harris knows what she believes, because she kind of always just goes with the flavor of the week. I think people have called her a chameleon. So, but yeah, what were you going to say, Jim? I'm sorry, I interrupted.
Well, no, I mean, maybe just because your X handle is the fracking guy. That's what you kind of got the Heartland Institute into, the fracking business meaning examining it and looking at its effects, actually looking at the technology and how it works. And I think what I thought you were going to get at was that you don't believe Kamala Harris even understands what fracking is, and what a revolutionary technology that has been, and how important it has become to the American energy economy.
Yeah, I mean, probably not. I think that Biden was smart to pretend that he wasn't anti-fracking, because I think that helped him carry Pennsylvania, because, you know, there are states like New Mexico and Pennsylvania that have substantial oil and gas reserves that depend on that technology. I think something like a third of New Mexico's funding comes from oil and gas, but they don't seem to appreciate that fact. But yeah, I just think that the geopolitical and economic position of the United States would be hurt a lot if she got her way on fracking.
Yeah. All right. I just put into the chat under Heartland's account that we don't seem to have many questions. And that's probably because I didn't mention that we love to answer your questions. You can put them in the chat so we can address them on the air. Anthony Watts, who knows how long he'll be able to stay with us in his remote location, but the rest of us may stick around if we have enough of them.
I mean, look, fracking is
Go ahead.
one thing, but they've been awful on appliances. They lied about appliances. They said, we're not trying to take away your gas stove. And then they write rules to take away gas stoves, at least are all but their wealthy friends. Now, some of their allies actually are a little bit more consistent. In New York, they want to ban gas and wood fire stoves in pizzerias and in restaurants. And their wealthy elite chefs are saying, like, well, we're out of here. You don't allow us to cook our meals the way we want to. Good luck finding your favorite chef, because we're going to go someplace where we can cook the way we want to, the way we think it's best. And the way you've said, the people who go to these restaurants, you've said you like the food. Well, it takes what we do. They do the appliances. They want to get rid of cars. Look, who's pushing the EV mandate? Who says we got to get rid of 70% of the fossil fuel cars by 2035? It's not magic. It's Biden Harris, and Harris is even worse. On if you take anything that Biden has proposed, any plan that he has put forward, Harris is worse on it. She was worse when she ran for office, and I see no reason for believing that were she to obtain the office of presidency, she wouldn't go back to her original self.
Yeah. I mean, the most important legislative act she has made as vice president was being the tie-breaking vote for the Inflation Reduction Act. And of course, the Inflation Reduction Act had nothing to do with inflation. It had everything to do with climate, to the point that in Biden's kind of sad farewell speech from the Oval Office the other day, he said that he passed the greatest climate bill anyone has ever accomplished. And as soon as I heard those words pass his lips, I'm like, then why wasn't the word climate in the damn name of the bill? I mean, it's we live in bizarro world. But
how's that inflation been since you passed it?
Well, there you go. We wait for maybe a couple questions here, and then maybe we'll wrap up the show. But you mentioned the EV mandate, and this wasn't a planned topic for the show, but we have been kicking around news that I think I saw a headline last week or the week before on how Ford is going to either crank down or maybe just start really giving up making electric vehicles, because, gosh, what do you know? There isn't a market for it. There certainly isn't a mass market for electric vehicles. And in fact, Donald Trump, maybe Isaac can jump in here, but Donald Trump had said that he was going to kill the EV mandate. Then, of course, our corrupt legacy media says there is no EV mandate, but we know there is, based on the CAFE standards they keep cranking up, so that you have no choice but to produce electric vehicles. I mean, the amount of stupidity, the amount of stupidity the media thinks the American people have just blows my mind. Like, we can't figure this out. But even though Trump said that he was going to get rid of the EV mandate, Elon Musk, who's made his fortune on Tesla electric vehicles, said, that's fine with me. I have no problem with it. I wasn't surprised to hear him say that. Were you surprised to hear him say that, Isaac?
No, not the mandate, because the mandate is making the other automakers produce EVs. Like, the mandate doesn't preserve Tesla's market share. And that's why I think Elon is acting this way. He wants the subsidies because the subsidies help pad his bank account. And, I don't know why you're all calling it X. It's Twitter. And until he stops putting that sensitive content on there, you should disrespect him by continuing to call it Twitter. But no, Elon is part of the grift. He likes this. Like, he's, currently working to elect Republicans, allegedly going to donate, vast sums of money each month to elect it. But I think that's partially because he doesn't want the EV subsidies to go away if and when Republicans get into office and start looking at repealing the IRA subsidies. So I think it's all self-preservation, and he's just looking to do what's best for his bottom line.
Yeah,
it's not just Ford, though. It's not just Ford. What did they say? They lost over $1 billion on EVs last year. They claim $40,000 a vehicle. I think it's much higher.
Yeah.
But Porsche has said they're not going to. They're backing off on their EV targets. They're going to keep producing gas-powered Cayennes long past the time they said they would. Even Tesla's market share is way down on the decline in sales.
Mm-hmm.
It's one car company after another. Ford is one we know. Ford is big, but across the board, these guys are getting wiped out. Toyota has never bought into it totally.
Yeah, they're
So-
smart.
Yeah. Well, they're producing. They produce hybrids, right?
Right.
Hybrids, but that's a different thing.
Well,
Their
I've
policies are
seen
different
some
by the
very,
market.
I've seen some very spicy posts on Toyota's like actual corporate webpage when it comes to EVs and stuff, and they just talk about how like and a fully electric vehicle isn't even as good as a hybrid in the areas that like they want EVs for, which is the environmental stuff, like because the mileage is so poor compared to something like a hybrid, and the amount of electricity that it just whatever it is. Toyota put out a huge study where they calculated and found that the hybrids were actually better in the end anyway. Now, of course, you have to take that with a grain of salt because it's Toyota wants their hybrids to sell, so it is.
There
what
was
it
a
is,
time. There was a time, and people don't realize it. There was a time when EVs competed directly with fossil fuel vehicles with no subsidies.
Yeah.
Anyone know when that was?
Early 1900s.
Late 1800s, actually. Yeah. EVs. Edison had an electric vehicle, and they had no subsidies for either brand. And guess what went out in the marketplace? And that was before you had the kinds of batteries that we have today that blow up in your driveway or your garage. That was with the old batteries, right? That just ran out of power after a very short period of time when you were going 12 miles per hour.
That's true.
But so they've been around for a long time. They couldn't compete then, and they can't compete on a level playing field today. But Kamala's all for them.
Yep. Well, we'll see how the election turns out. All right. So we do have some good questions from you guys in the chat. So we're going to hit them right now. Linnea, take it away.
Yep. All right. Hello, everybody. All of our questions came in the last like 2 seconds here, so we got a ton all at once. So we are going to start with this one from Engineer Guy. He says, will fake news media protect Kamala while going after Trump on his position on climate, like with the EVs? This is to anyone who wants to jump in.
They already are.
They
already are.
The question, I thought it was
the question. Yeah, it's not will they? It's they already are.
Yeah.
Here's a funny one from our friend Chris Shattuck. He says, here's a question. Who in God's name would want to handle Harris?
Yeah. Who wants to have a Harris handler as the title on their resume?
All right.
I'm not going to go where that could take us.
This is from Energy Colonizer. He says, question for Isaac or anyone. What does it take for big energy to cancel a big wind farm project?
Yeah, so the big thing right now is you have a lot of inflation in the offshore wind industry. It's basically the price of cement, the price of steel, the price of labor, all are escalating, pretty quickly. And also interest rates are super high. And the problem with wind turbines and solar panels is all of the cost for that is paid up front. And if you have high interest rates during that period, you basically have a much higher mortgage payment that you need to be making on that. So when you have these offshore wind projects that had contracts signed in 2018, 2019, 2020 during a low interest rate environment, they said that they were going to be able to produce electricity for $65, $60, $70 a megawatt hour. And now all this inflation has crept in. Basically, they can't meet the terms of their contract, and that's what's causing a lot of the offshore wind contracts to be canceled.
The truth is, should Trump come in, he said he'd cancel these things day one. He may or may not be able to do that. Maybe the way he could do that is to require a thorough environmental impact statement, a revision of it that includes the cumulative impact of offshore wind farms that have already been approved, which is what we're asking for in our lawsuit, because that is a requirement of the law that was not followed. So he could come in and say, I've decided that you haven't followed the law. we're going to put these on hold until there is this cumulative impact statement.
All right, we got to go a little bit quick here because we do have people that have to leave soon. So, from Slartibartfest, he says, "Are EVs a plot to destroy the car industry, banning ICE cars, which are the mainstay of the industry, and then having to produce loss-making EVs?"
I don't think they're that smart. I think they're just simply following their feelings about, we need clean green cars. I don't think that there's any, giant conspiracy theory here to shut down the auto industry. I don't think they're that savvy.
Well, I never believed in any conspiracy theories, but for some people, the most extreme environmentalists, the people who say back to the Pleistocene, and there's a subsegment of the environmental population that says that and believes it, I think they do see it as a way of destroying an entire industry and getting you on. Remember, it's not just that they're trying to get rid of internal combustion engines. They're also trying to limit flights and put you on public transit everywhere, meaning trains, right? They don't want to build new rail lines, as far as I can tell. That's infrastructure. We don't want that. So basically, what they don't want you to do is to get around very conveniently. There'd be a lot of bike sales. You take public transit, rail if you could. I believe that there's some of that behind it. Not for everybody, but for some segment.
Okay, from JPS, we have greetings from Belgium. JP here. Question.
Wow.
Could you have a chat with Valencia Zarkova? I'm so sorry if that's not how you pronounce it. According to her and others, Valentina, we are heading to cooler decades because of the sun. Anthony, I think this is one you can answer fast. Not regarding can we have a chat with someone. We're open to talking to most people. I'm not familiar with that particular individual. But in terms of the cooling, the solar cooling question, I think Anthony has talked about this at length at other times. So, Anthony, what are your thoughts?
I think he's trying to guard his thoughts. I've talked to him about Valentina before.
Yeah, well, every time we look at solar, we look at sunspots, for example. Willis Eckenbach has done a tremendous amount of work analyzing supposed sunspot correlations with temperature and so forth. And the data just doesn't support a strong correlation between climate change and sunspot cycles. And so I'm just going to leave it at that.
All right.
All right. From Engineer Guy again, he says, I keep seeing concepts, prototypes for more and more EVs. Will they ever come to fruition? I can answer this one really fast. When it comes to vehicle prototypes, the vast majority of them and concept art and stuff, the vast majority of them will never get made. It's just investment advertising, basically. So most of them, no. Any thoughts on the nuclear reactor tested in China that uses passive cooling and is supposedly meltdown proof?
I haven't examined that technology yet, but I don't believe any nuclear reactor is completely meltdown proof. I mean, if you're harnessing fission and you don't keep it under control, it's going to get out of control. It's simply that. So maybe they've made it safer, but I don't think it's actually meltdown proof.
Isn't the AP1000 that they built in Georgia also passively cooled?
Yeah, I don't think China's the first one to do this. I keep seeing this getting spread around, but I think actually we have a couple in the United States that are passive.
Yeah, and I think what that means is the water keeps circulating without an external pump. So the reason that Fukushima melted down was there was this giant tidal wave. It wasn't the earthquake, it was the giant tidal wave that happened afterward. And the pumps to keep the water circulating in the reactor were located in the basement, and they got swamped by all the water. So if those pumps had been on the second story instead of in the basement, that reactor wouldn't have melted down. So hopefully this kind of alleviates that potential problem with nuclear technology.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Isaac, about that. You have that circulating loop of cooling. But if something breaks that loop, even in a passive designed reactor, pipes break, valve fails, something, it's going to break the cycle. And
that's totally fair.
Then you got a problem.
Well, I think the point of passive reactors is that it's not just circulation. Basically, there's a dump of water as soon as the power goes out and fills the chamber and prevents it from melting down. But I could be wrong. I will say this: there's not just one type of reactor that's being tested right now. A variety of nuclear reactors are being developed. China's moving forward with reactors. They're moving forward with everything. If there's one country that has an all of the above approach to electric power, it's China. Coal, we want more of it. Natural gas, if we can get it. Nuclear, yep. Wind and solar, So they're all in on all energy sources because they just want more power.
Yep. All right, Anthony, I know you got to go. You can wave goodbye, and we'll finish the last couple of questions.
All right. Good luck to you all. I'll be back.
Thank you, Anthony.
Take
care. See you next week.
All right. We're gonna whip through. We've got 3 more questions here. I see that some more popped up in the chat, but we're just gonna get through these ones that we already have plugged up here. He goes, how were the 3 offshore wind projects in New York canceled previously?
Yeah, that was the price pressure that I spoke about earlier. And New York has actually allowed them to rebid at a higher price now, and they've accepted that. So the state of New York is just doing bad things to the people of New York.
Yeah, it's not just New York. Others, there were already 10,000 I think 20,000 megawatts of wind power approved. Biden was going to build 30, and half of that dropped off. It was purely price pressure. None of it was due to environmental rules. It's just they bid in at a certain price, and they came back and they said, we can't meet that price. Some states have allowed them to rebid. Some haven't so far. New York initially said, no, we're not going to allow you to rebid because we don't want to go back to the ratepayers. Now, if you have like Virginia, where Dominion is the king, they got a sweetheart deal in Virginia. They didn't have to bid in. They said, we'll build this much offshore wind so long as you let us pass whatever the costs are onto ratepayers. And the legislature and the former Democratic government says, sounds good to us. So it doesn't matter how much it costs in Virginia. My suspicion is they won't be able to meet their current, in other places, they won't be able to meet their current brand new targets, and they'll have to come back again for more, for more subsidies. And maybe, as they did at least initially in New York, they'll finally get fed up and say, no, sorry, we're just not going to build this.
Yep. All right. From Tom White, we have catalytic converters make CO into water vapor and CO2. The 2 primary greenhouse gases. Without converters, how long would it take for natural conversion? I don't know if we can answer this question in this. What percentage of carbon monoxide would become carbon dioxide? I don't know if we can answer this off the top of our heads here. But I'm not really sure what the point is.
I'll say one thing. If
Tom is still in the chat and he can comment real quick to say what the direction he was going with his question was, I'll pop it up on screen. But
I'll say this is one thing that I haven't seen environmentalists waive yet, which is the need for catalytic converters to prevent certain types of pollution. I haven't seen them say, oh, that's got to go by the wayside too for climate change. So
yeah, right. Okay, well, we'll skip to Hippie's question here. Hippie says, when will the people have a say in what we get to eat or what energy we want? That is a great question.
I think you do when you vote. If you vote for people who think they have the right to control what you eat and to make your energy as expensive as possible because they are members of a climate cult, well, then you get what you get. That's why the people in Massachusetts off Nantucket are getting what they're getting, a closed beach with pieces of fiberglass that are washing up so they can't walk around barefoot. So that's when you get to decide.
But I'm not even convinced you get to decide then. Who chooses the candidates? How are they chosen? Is RFK on the ticket? Are all the others that would like to run out there are going to be on the ticket? I don't know, because we've set up the system where there's only certain people. And of course, we know in a lot of states, let's say Utah, we're writing about that right now, or Louisiana, or North Dakota. We've got people who supposedly represent Republicans who are climate alarmists themselves. So I'm not convinced just voting is enough. I think until you go back and say, show me in the Constitution where the government is assigned, is delegated the specific authority to decide what fuel I burn in my home or for transportation, and they can't show that until you get rid of that, the whole infrastructure. You've got to drain the swamp and the thinking that created the swamp.
Yep. All right. It's a good thing you're not too passionate about that, Sterling. You might have gotten out of hand and pounded your table or something. So, all right. I think that does it for the Q&A for today and for the show for today. It's been a fantastic one. We appreciate everybody who has tuned in today, especially in the live chat, so we can get your questions and your always awesome comments as we do the broadcast every Friday at 1 p.m. Central Time. I also want to thank our special guest, Isaac Orr. He's the VP of Always On Energy Research, and he's also the proprietor of energybadboys.substack.com. Do you have anything else you need to plug for us, Isaac?
Yeah, the website actually went up today, so you can check us out at aoenergy.org and make a big, fat, tax-deductible contribution.
Fantastic. Definitely encourage all of our listeners and viewers to do that. I want to thank the just recently departed, not dearly departed, Anthony Watts for leaving a little early on the show today. Linnea Lucan, Research Fellow at the Heartland Institute, and H. Sterling Burnett, the Director of the Robinson Center on Climate and Environmental Policy at the Heartland Institute. And also our streaming partners, which we'll be seeing a lot of in the future. CFACT at cfact.org and junkscience.com. That's the website of Steve Malloy. Always check those two things out. Also go to heartland.org, climateataglance.org, climaterealism.com, energyataglance.com. Did I leave any out, guys?
Climate Change Weekly on ECN.
Yep. Subscribe to Climate Change Weekly. Go to heartland.org/subscribe, and you can get that every week in your inbox. Thank you all for listening and watching, and we will talk to you next week. Bye-bye.
Come on, man.